Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got on the docket, Rick?
We got some draft day decisions.
Let's hit it.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What is poppin', Fantasy Champions? It is, well, I try not to say the date anymore. I'm trying to reformat, but I was about to say it. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. What's going on, Rick?
What's up?
We got some interesting stuff today. Hard draft day decisions. Some news at the end of the show instead of at the beginning. Interesting stuff. Before we hop into our draft day decisions, how you doing, Rick?
Oh, I'm doing peachy. How are you?
Fantastic. Check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs. You can follow me at Morgan Colby _FF. You can follow Ricky at Rick. Is it Ricky or Rick?
It's Rick.
Rick Lemon _FF.
Actually, I don't know.
You can.
I'm going to double check that.
You'll find us eventually. Go on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions.
It's Ricky. Sorry.
It's probably somewhere on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But like us, facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, be sure to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment one of your favorite players that we talk about on this episode down below. Or if you just want to argue with other people, feel free to do that too. Rick, we got the draft guide. Why don't you tell them about the draft guide?
Guys, the draft guide.
What are you doing if you haven't bought it? I mean, honestly.
What are you doing if you haven't bought it? It's only $25. The price is staying at $25. And guess what's in it? Full rankings, breakouts, busts, player draft values, player breakdowns, and so much more, guys. And if you order now, you'll be entered in for a chance to be in our listener league and attempt to beat me and Morgan, which is not going to happen. But you should tell your friends about it.
Yeah, dude. So let's jump right into our draft day decisions.
Sure.
So essentially, if you're wondering what that even means, because I was wondering what it means today.
It's draft day decisions, dude.
You're sitting there on draft day and you're wondering, okay, well, I'm on the board at pick 11 and I want to know what running back to take. And there's two guys on the board that are very similar in caliber. And we're going to tell you which person to take. So we'll do two running backs, two wide receivers, and then throw a quarterback at the end. And then we'll jump into the news at the end and close out the show. So let's talk about the first one. Early in the draft, pick 11. Another podcast, Fantasy Footballers. I was listening to them earlier today. A plug for them, I guess. Everyone knows who they are. Yeah. But Jason Moore from them said that he would prefer the 11th pick in the draft.
In 12-team?
In a 12-team format, the 11th pick if he had to choose one. So, mock drafting at 10, 11 on a regular basis. I have found that some guys are falling to that spot. Some of these two players fall to that spot at certain times, but Nick Chubb at ADP 11 or Joe Mixon at ADP 11 and a half.
So this one, for me, I would like both, first of all. I like both these players. And then it really depends on the format, too. I think in PPR, I'd probably go Mixon.
Okay.
But in half PPR and standard, I think I'm going to be in the minority. And I know you're going to disagree with me, but I'll take Nick Chubb. I'm just really, really high on Nick Chubb this year. Like, really high on him. The way he rushed last year with a poor offensive line, and they added what was the guy they drafted? They drafted
the
a left
offensive
tackle.
lineman. Yeah, it's Jedrick Mills or Wills or something like that.
And then they also signed a lineman as well, so they added two pieces. I think they signed a third guy actually, but he was more of a depth move. But either way, Nick Chubb was one of the best running backs in the league last year on the ground, playing in a terrible offense and a terrible offensive line.
Yeah.
And he still rushed for 5 yards per carry. If I was a betting man, I'd be betting on Nick Chubb to win the rushing title this year, even with Kareem Hunt there, which I know is going to be a concern for a lot of people.
Yeah,
and I think it does take away some of his receiving, which is the reason why I don't think Nick Chubb. Like I'd probably take Joe Mixon and PPR because I think Nick Chubb will probably only get like 25, 30 catches. But I honestly, with the way that the Browns, with Kevin Stefanski there now, they're going to run the ball heavy, protect Baker Mayfield, which is what they're going to try to do. They bolstered the offensive line. I think they're going to be more efficient offense as well. So I think they'll get more touchdowns, more red zone opportunities. I can easily see Nick Chubb winning the rushing title and getting like 12 to 13 rushing touchdowns this year.
So I have a couple of things. I mean, obviously, on our show, we've kind of talked about both players, and we like both players. So I'll start off really quickly with Nick Chubb. Last year, Dalvin Cook, over the course, because that's where Stefanski came from, as you referenced, as the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Dalvin Cook was the running back there, had 286 rushing yards on a per 16 game. He only played 14 games, so I paced it. So he would have had 286 rush attempts. They also like to get him involved in the passing game, which I don't think is going to happen for Nick Chubb this year unless Kareem Hunt gets traded, cut, or hurt. If he's playing on the Cleveland Browns, he's going to get the passing game work most likely. So you look at how many rushing attempts last year Nick Chubb had. He had 298 freaking rushing attempts.
Yep.
He didn't score as many touchdowns as you would think, but you're right. The efficiency's there. The thing that concerns me the most, and he actually didn't do too bad in the passing game, very similar to Joe Mixon's numbers last year, 49 targets, 36 receptions. I think that will obviously drop with the presence of Kareem Hunt in the offense
with
the
Hunt
whole
there,
season.
I want to say he prorated at like around 20, 25 catches.
Yeah. So I don't think they'll get him fully involved unless they completely, like I said, cut, trade, or do something with Joe Mixon. But anyway, he was very efficient.
Kareem Hunt, you mean?
I'm sorry, with Kareem Hunt. He was very efficient on the ground. He did a lot of great things last year, but I just can't. In half PP and standard formats, I'd probably say Nick Chubb like you. In half PPR and PPR formats, it's hard for me to take a running back who, even if he gets 300 rushes, a running back who doesn't get the passing work. Because here's the thing with if a guy had 250 rushes and 50 catches in a season, then he's getting 25 fantasy points on the catches as opposed to getting 300 rushes, which, you get the same attempt amounts or touch amounts total, but you get 25 to 50 more fantasy points because you're getting the receptions on top of that, as opposed to in this same half PPR format, getting Nick Chubb, who might have 300 plus touches, but only like 10 catches. So it's like the ceiling is a little bit, or the floor is a little bit lower for Nick Chubb, especially if he doesn't have those good weeks. Now, that goes without saying on the Joe Mixon side, where he had last year 56 catches for 40. He had 45 catches for 45 targets for 35 catches. I was reading like the wrong numbers there.
Yeah, you're reading last year's.
But anyway, so yeah, he did not get even prorated in the second half of the season when Joe Mixon had a fantastic run of games. He didn't have a very highly prorated target and reception count in the receiving position, which is not a trait of a Sean McVay / Zach Taylor offense, right? So I don't know if we can expect more passing work from Joe Mixon. If we do, I think it only is like 40 catches. So we're not talking about Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb being far off in the reception totals. But I did do a deep dive on Joe Mixon. And do you want to hear about it? Or
sure, you go right ahead. Now's the time.
I'm having very much.
Try to make it quick though.
Early in the offseason, I was super excited about Joe Mixon, and then as the offseason went along, I started opening my mind to multiple sources and multiple people. And the reason, or multiple opinions, I should say. And and I started hearing a lot of different stuff. Obviously, it enlightened me to the fact that Joe Mixon doesn't actually get too much passing game work, even though he's a good pass catcher. I mean, he averages 8.2 yards per reception.
The year before that, he did have 43 catches in 13 games.
Right. So I don't know why he wasn't involved. He's very capable of it. I don't know why he wasn't involved in the passing game. It really doesn't make any sense, but it kind of quenches the fire. We talked about on our league winning running backs episode, I believe, that, you know, most league winning running backs or RB1s in all of fantasy, you know, or top 3 running backs generally need 50 catches in order to ascend into that category, especially in half PPR and PPR formats. And I don't know if Joe Mixon can do that. I mean, I don't think that's going to hinder him, especially if he has like 43 targets. I mean, 43 receptions, 7 receptions isn't going to do anything. But
yeah.
So I was trying to figure out what the crap went on with Joe Mixon last year, because when you look at the first half of the season, he was the RB32. When you look at the second half of the season, he was the RB5. So weeks 1 through 8, he was the RB32. Weeks 9 through 17, he was the RB5 in fantasy football. And it's like, what? I was sitting there going, is that what we're going to get from Joe Mixon? Is it like when Derrick Henry broke out and, you know, he started playing really well for Tennessee in 2018, and then I trashed him last year because I was like, the first half of the season he was absolute garbage. In the second half of the season he had a couple of good games where he performed, and then Henry comes out this year and lights up the field and has a really great season. And if you do the whole season 17 weeks instead of 16 weeks like we do, Derrick Henry ends up being the running back 2 in fantasy. So he ended up having a great year. I was dead wrong on my bust projection, but Joe Mixon kind of did the same thing last year where he was trash. You know what his yards per carry total was week 1 through 8?
What was
3.17.
Yeah.
And he was averaging like 5 yards, 6 yards a reception. It was just bad.
What though? He was
horrible.
getting the carries.
Well, that's what I looked at. I'm like, why was he not producing? And I looked at it, and when you looked at the numbers for Joe Mixon, he didn't get a lot of work in the first half of the season in terms of rushing the football. And so, you ask the question, like, why was that the case? And so I decided to look at it. I'm like, was that just because Giovanni Bernard was there and he was taking work from Joe Mixon? What was the case? They had a maximum in weeks 1 through 8, a maximum rush attempt per game for the entire running back position on their team of 23 attempts. And it happened once. So they were averaging about 20 attempts at the running back position a game, which they weren't using. So the
first 10 weeks?
In the first 8 weeks.
First 8 weeks.
So it was a negative game script for Joe Mixon, like an entirely negative game script for Joe Mixon, because they were getting blown out and they were trying to keep themselves in games. And I think by week 8, when they got to the bye week, they were like, we are 0-8. We have no shot at making the playoffs. We have no shot at doing anything. Let's just try to implement our offense. Either they thought like that, or they said, we need to get Joe Mixon involved, because week 10, when they came off their bye, Joe Mixon had 30 rush attempts and the team at total, I think, had 35. In that week, which is the highest total of the season. And then from that point on, they rushed it 28 to 30 times a game as a team. And Joe Mixon got the percentage of that share. So it wasn't like Joe Mixon wasn't getting the market share of the carries. It's just that they weren't running the football at all. So that's kind of what happened with Joe Mixon. And then as you started to notice, as the season went along for Joe Mixon, the schedule got easier. The game scripts got closer. The games got a lot closer, and Joe Mixon got a lot more attempts, and he started to look more like the Zach Taylor version of Todd Gurley. You know what I mean? Of what Todd Gurley was in the Sean McVay offense. So Mixon's there. So then I was like, okay, what can we expect from Joe Mixon in the 2020 season? Because I don't know what's going on. I'm really quickly finishing this conversation about Joe Mixon. But so I decided to look into this year. He has, according to CBS.com, the Cincinnati Bengals have the 27th hardest schedule in the league. They have a combined win percentage from 2019. Their opponents have a combined win percentage of .477. So you can say that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get opportunities to keep a positive game script at times. They added Joe Burrow. Slight improvements on the offensive line. They have a really good receiving core. Their offense is underrated, I think. And not just that, but almost every skill position is like top 7 or top 8 in fantasy points given up per game from last year. So Joe Mixon's got opportunity in this offense. I think we're more inclined to see the Joe Mixon from weeks 9 through 17 last year. If that is the case, this guy's going to get 325 plus attempts if he plays a full 16 game season. Knowing the efficiency that he can bring to the table with an improved offense, I think that Joe Mixon can be a top 6 running back. So what I'm going to say is, because of the efficiency, because of the passing game opportunities that he's going to get, is I would take Joe Mixon here over Nick Chubb. I think I have him ranked ahead of Nick Chubb in my rankings. So I would, obviously take Joe Mixon over Nick Chubb, but lately have not been super high on Nick Chubb just because of the lack of passing game opportunity. If he had the passing game work, he would probably be in my top 5 of running backs, but he just doesn't.
If he had the passing game work, I'd put him I'd put him in the same category as like Zeke. Like he'd be like 3rd or 4th.
Right. So anyway, that's my long tangent about Joe Mixon.
No, that's fine. I mean, you had all the information, so this is the best time to use it. No, I mean, and I do agree overall. Like, I think Mixon is probably the safer bet too.
Yeah.
And Chubb, I'm kind of betting on the fact that Chubb is going to have a monster year on the ground, which is the only way he can produce big fantasy numbers in half PPR.
The big concern I have with Nick Chubb too is how many, like, I'll give you an over-under 10 touchdowns for Chubb.
See, I think it's going to be over.
Yeah, I think it's going to be under. He's had 2 8-touchdown career seasons.
I think,
it might go up. It just depends on the efficiency of the offense.
Cleveland Browns team that he's ever been on. So that's why I do think. And they added
Rick, that's not saying a lot.
Even though they might trade Njoku, but their plan is to have a 2 tight end set and like just run the ball.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think it's very close though. I don't like. I make it sound like Joe Mixon's like that far ahead.
If I had the 11th overall pick, I'd like to get both these guys.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, their ADPs are a half point next to each other. So it's definitely, you might at pick 11, 10, somewhere in that range. I've been doing mocks on Sleeper and I been doing mocks at 10. And Joe Mixon falls to me sometimes. Nick Chubb falls to me at others. So it's like, it just really depends on what happens. But you could realistically end up with it, at least one of these guys. Sometimes you might get lucky. I've had a mock where he fell to me in the second round. So that might happen. Or Joe Mixon fell to me in the second round.
Oh wow!
I don't think Chubb is going to fall that far. He's like a top 8 pick right now. So
I've seen the opposite. I've seen Chubb fall in the second round.
Interesting.
So
it really depends, but I would take Mixon. You would take Chubb.
Yeah, it depends on the scoring format, but I'm betting on Chubb this year.
Okay. Number 2 is an interesting one. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at ADP 35 or Devin Singletary at ADP 36.
Yeah, I mean, so I've talked about on the show, I like Devin Singletary a lot more than most people do. A lot of people are down on Devin Singletary this year.
Yeah.
And are on the Zach Moss bandwagon. I'm not one of those people. But I'm still going to go Clyde here.
Okay.
The reason being is I think Clyde has just the upside. I mean, Andy Reid compared him to Brian Westbrook.
Yeah.
They asked Patrick Mahomes, and everybody knows the story of who he wanted at running back. And he said Clyde. He's in arguably the best offense in the league. I could see him getting, he has the potential to get like.
Imagine asking your quarterback on scouting advice.
I know. But he has the potential to get like 60, 70 catches.
Yeah.
You know how good Andy Reid is with the screen game and getting players in like with space. He's gonna be a beast. To me, I'm taking the chance on Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
I mean, where is it? 34. Their ADP is 35 and 36.
Yeah. Right next to each other.
Yeah.
I mean,
to me, Clyde, I love Devin Singletary, but I don't really see him being like, does he in PPR? Do you think Devin Singletary has top 5 upside? I don't.
in PPR.
Yeah.
For Devin Singletary.
Yeah.
Oh no, not at all.
Yeah, but Clyde, like I think that's the ceiling.
PPR, half PPR, standard. I don't think Devin Singletary is reaching that point at all.
No, I don't either. But I think
Not
Clyde
anyway.
has a chance to,
Okay.
with that explosive offense and the touchdowns that he could get. I mean, remember the Chiefs like to run it on the goal line too. Like they run it more than people think on the goal line.
Yeah.
So if Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like it's very possible that he can get like 12, 13 total touchdowns with like 70 receptions.
I would like to think this is a tougher decision. And the hard part is that there is actually a lot of running backs at this point when I'm doing mocks that I for sure would take over Singletary at this point. And I don't know if I should just move Singletary down. The thing I'm noticing with Devin Singletary, and the thing that's explicitly concerning, is that obviously we heard the news that the Bills basically said that they're going to use Zach Moss in the Frank Gore role. Frank Gore was averaging about 10 rushes a game, 11 rushes a game, or touches, I should say, a game. It doesn't really matter to me. Like, I think Singletary's going to get his work in between, the 20s. But when they get in the red zone, they're going to hand it off to Zach Moss like they did Zach Taylor. I mean, not Zach. They're going to hand it to Zach Moss like they did Frank Gore. So if and when that happens, Singletary's touchdown upside is not going to be that high. I think
Singletary's touchdown upside also hurts from Josh Allen.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say that. His red zone, the red zone touches that Josh Allen plays very similar to Cam Newton in the context that when they get in the red zone, the team just trusts him to run it in. You know what I mean? So he gets 6-7 rushing touchdowns a season with Zach Moss coming in at the goal line and taking some of that work as well. I mean, Singletary last year, I heard this statistic earlier today, he had three total goal line carries last year, and they all came in the same game, and he scored like twice. But they just decided not to use him. And it's like, if they don't use Devin Singletary at all at the goal line, it's going to have to be breakaway runs, which, Singletary's a little bit on the slower side, so he's not going to do that. And I think the other hard part with Devin Singletary is that it's just going to all be reliant on, passing game work.
I think he's going to have a better year than people think, because I do think he can get like 60 catches, 50, maybe not 60, but like around 50 receptions,
over
200
under
carries,
over under 6 total touchdowns.
Yeah, see, I think he's going to be around there. That's the problem. I'll say over because I love Singletary, but it'll be like 6 or 7. I'm
going to say under. Like it'll be like 4 or 5.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised.
I think he's at ADP 36 as probably the 20th to 24th running back off the board. That's a great pick. Like, I think he's going to be 13, 14, maybe 15. He's going to be a high end RB2. Maybe
he's going to be better than people are still down on Singletary.
Right. So
he's going to be a great flex.
He might inch into the RB1 conversation at 12. But I think with
that would be, he would have to
pushing it.
Yeah.
But like that, it's all dependent on the touchdowns. Like I think he could have a 1,400 yard season all purpose if they give him the work that they did last year. I don't think Zach Moss came in to do anything but be a boulder in the red zone. That's about it. That's why they drafted him in the 3rd round, 2nd round, I can't remember. So I'm down on Singletary. I'm going to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. I think Clyde, obviously we've had the same kind of, agreement on Clyde. I'm a little bit more hesitant on rookies this year, only because with COVID-19 and there being no training camps, generally speaking, no preseason, it's going to be hard for those rookies to acclimate to the pro game and to the offenses that they're in and all of that stuff. So I think guys like Damian Williams, Marlon Mack, Kerryon Johnson, ahead of some of these rookie running backs, are going to get the benefit of the doubt.
I agree, yeah. In the first half of the season, like the second half of the season, it could be like Miles Sanders
for sure
last year, where you see like he ends up like, we'll see like Swift have a monster second half, or Jonathan Taylor have a monster second half. But for like the first like 6-7 weeks, I think I agree with you. I mean, I would assume that the veterans are going to get more work than people think.
Yeah, and I think the hard part with these two guys is that I'm not fading them because I like Clyde here. Mm-hmm. But if I'm sitting there on the draft board, I'm not, and there's other running backs like Todd Gurley, David Johnson are in this kind of conversation. And I don't want to draft, and David Montgomery. And I'm like, I don't want to draft those guys ahead of these two. But at the same time, I know they're going to get the opportunity. I know they're going to get the red zone work, and I know that
Todd Gurley, I might. He's the only one of those two guys who said that I might.
But anyway, for the sake of this argument, I'll take Clyde. Clyde fits the offense. Sure. That's why they drafted him last year in college. He had so you're wondering like, okay, Clyde had successful years in college. Why was that? His second year at LSU, he had 7 touchdowns, 658 yards at 4.5 yards a carry, which is horrible in college, and 11 receptions total on 14 targets in the season in 13 games. I mean, that's terrible. Let's not front. That's awful. Mm-hmm. Last year with Joe Burrow as a starting quarterback throwing 60 touchdowns. He had 1,400 rushing yards, which was 6.6 yards a carry, a lot better. 17
Really
total touchdowns, 55 receptions on 58 targets, and 453 receiving yards. Yep. So he played a lot better. What was the difference? A more efficient offense with Joe Burrow. What is he getting plopped into?
That's
a more efficient offense with...
I have heard arguments that say like, oh, well, he was only good at LSU because the offense was good in LSU.
You're on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right. Exactly.
That might be when they're on, they might be the best offense in the, you know what? Forget, they are the best offense in the NFL.
When they're going.
When they're going. That's it. It's plain and simple. And like you drop him on, I would say like that offense in LSU was insanely good and it's a college game, offense. But when the Chiefs are on, there's nothing that beats them. Like you can't, they're just way better. And I think Clyde jumping in there, if he gets full-time opportunity like Kareem Hunt did, I don't see him being any different than Kareem Hunt. I think the upside is there.
Mid to low end RB1.
Yeah, I really think the upside's there for Clyde. And I think if you get in the first 2 rounds, right, and the 3 running back approach has really intrigued me this year, but I don't really recommend. Everyone's like, draft all running backs in the first 3 rounds. And I'm like, let's slow our roll. It's tempting, but at the same time, I've been thinking about like the situation where, like in fantasy football, I hate to use this phrase, but zig when everyone else zags. You know what I mean? Like everyone's drafting running backs right now. And this is the year where all the wide receivers are going to poop their pants and there's going to be like 5 good wide receivers and they're all drafted in the first 3 rounds. And it's like, should we just draft the running backs? Or should we draft some wide receivers in there? So I'm like, it's hard for me to draft all 3 running backs because I do like the wide receiver position, obviously. I'm a running backs guy too. It's
funny how like these players are like almost the exact same. Like they're both 5'7". They're both about 205 pounds.
Who, Singletary and Clyde?
They're both the same. Yeah, and they're both like receiving backs, but they're not known for their speed, even though they're tiny.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. But would you have the same argument with the younger player that you were talking about versus the veteran running back? With Clyde and Damian Williams, do you think they might use Damian Williams to start the season more than people think?
That
scares me. I think they might.
One of 2 things is going to happen. I think Damian will play, and he'll get the, like last year, Montgomery was going to be the starter for the Chicago Bears. We knew that. He got like 16 attempts, I think, in that week 1 game or something like that. He had opportunities, but they started Mike Davis because he's the vet. Damian Williams is going to start week 1. People are going to be like, I told you. And then Clyde's going to get like 18 carries. The big thing that people talked about, and you have to look back at the Kareem Hunt, because the biggest thing is the Kareem Hunt, kind of comparisons. Because Kareem Hunt, if you look up Kareem Hunt's workout metrics and build, he does not look too far off from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I think they were just drafting a carbon copy of Kareem Hunt when they drafted Clyde. But the big thing for me is that I think that, I don't know, like obviously, like with Kareem Hunt, he came in and who was the backup running back there or the starting running back at the time? Spencer Ware, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
He got hurt at some point in the preseason or during week 1. And then Kareem Hunt came in. And he was playing, he was getting snaps, but then when Spencer Ware went down, Kareem Hunt came in and just took it over. It was just over from there. So it's a question of them cutting Damian Williams getting hurt at some point, or him just taking the job from Damian Williams altogether. I do think as the excitement has worn off for me with Clyde to the point where I question whether or not, like, I don't think Damian Williams is good enough to steal the job from Clyde. I think Clyde's a first-round running back, and I think that he's talented, and they drafted him to do something specific. But Williams has been there. He's a fighter, and he earns opportunity, and I think they like him. So I think that he's going to be a thorn in Clyde's side for at least a couple of weeks before he takes off. But it just depends. So one of 2 things happens. He either starts week 1, Damian Williams, or they just outright cut him in training camp. Which would be the death of Damian Williams because Lamar Miller and Devonta Freeman are on the market. So, that would be not good. But I think Clyde will get the job at some point. Is he worth the 3rd round pick? Yes. I would take him over Singletary just because of sheer upside. I think at the end of the season, you'll be really happy with what Clyde ends up doing. I mean, what he's going into, like if he got drafted by, the Lions, to sit with, carry on, I would be concerned. I'd be like, Clyde sucks. But because he's in Kansas City, I mean, the sky's the limit for this guy.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's all about the opportunity.
It's all about opportunity. So let's talk about some wide receivers though. The next two guys, Calvin Ridley or Allen Robinson. Calvin Ridley's ADP is 41 and Allen Robinson's ADP is 42. Give me your thoughts.
This might be the hardest one. This one might be harder than Nick Chubb versus Joe Mixon.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard for me because I love Calvin Ridley. I really do. You love Calvin Ridley.
I do.
I think I'd rather have Allen Robinson in a redraft, though.
Okay.
It's so
I hate when I write these things down thinking that we're going to disagree. And then it just
we disagreed on the first one.
That's true, but it was like a soft disagreement.
I have Calvin Ridley ranked one spot. I have Calvin Ridley ranked 13th and Allen Robinson ranked 14th.
I forgot where I have anybody ranked at this point.
It's neck and neck. And the only reason I put Calvin Ridley that high is because I believe in his upside. And I think he's going to have a really breakout, great season. But I think that a safer pick is Allen Robinson. I mean, the dude had 154 targets last year, which is ridiculous. He's the only guy in that offense that is going to get any targets. I mean, I heard some deep sleepers like Anthony Miller. It's Allen Robinson. He's going to get to work. He's probably, if he stays healthy.
I don't understand how the Bears were in a total yards per game amount. They were the 31st ranked offense in the NFL last year. And people can come out and get excited about Anthony Miller and the secondary wide receivers for the Bears. And I'm like,
it's just because
are you
Nick
guys
Foles,
stupid?
I think it's just the Nick Foles.
I'm like, I like Anthony Miller. I do. But let's stop with that. The Bears aren't going to get that much better with Nick Foles. Can we just relax?
That's what I think some people are overrating. I think they will be a little more efficient with Nick Foles if he ends up being the starting quarterback, but I don't think it's going to completely change their offense.
Yeah.
My concern with Allen Robinson, the only concern I have, because if he stays healthy, he's going to 150 targets, and he's going to be a low end wide receiver.
Yeah.
If he stays healthy.
Dropping things in here.
Which is something that you can say about any fantasy player if he stays healthy. So he's a very safe option.
Okay.
But Allen Robinson he missed 3 games in 2018. He missed a full season pretty much in 2017. And then in his rookie season, he missed 6 games as well. So it's not like he's known for playing a full 16 throughout his career. He does get injured a decent amount. But no, I do really like Allen Robinson. I think his touchdowns, though, is kind of limited. Where Calvin Ridley, it's he's known for getting touchdowns. I mean, he had 10 his rookie season. In 13 games last year, he had 7, which is how many Allen Robinson
paced out to 9 per 16.
I mean, Calvin Ridley has gotten better each year with more target. He had 93 last year in playing in just 13 games. I don't know what that is
paced out to 114.
I'm guessing that's around 120 targets.
114.
114 targets, yeah. So, and then there's been talks this year too. I mean, Matt Ryan has said some great things about Calvin Ridley. I think I'm paraphrasing, but it was essentially we expect big things from him, and he's going to take a big step, and this could be his breakout year. So I have a question about a few things on Calvin Ridley.
Okay. So I'll just ask a quick over under 120 targets for him next year.
I think it's going to be around there, but I'll say over barely.
Okay. And then the only other thing I'll say is obviously we have you have to look at vacated targets in an offense. They traded Sanu midway through the season
in week 6
or 7. I don't know what the effects are of that the later half of the season. I can actually, what did you say? Week 7?
I'll confirm that.
Yeah.
I think it was week 7.
It doesn't look like from that point on, Calvin Ridley got more work. He looks like he got the same amount of targets that he did in the early portion of the season. So I don't think that is, going to affect him, but that's vacated target share right there. And then obviously the loss of Austin Hooper is vacated target share, but they did bring on ex-Ravens tight end Hayden Hurst and brought him into the fold. Now, I don't think he's going to get Austin Hooper numbers, but he is going to command some of that target share back. So I don't what you saw Calvin Ridley get at 114 last year in terms of target share in a per 16 game basis, I don't think that's going to increase at all. In terms of like, I think it'll get to 120, maybe 125 at best, like you said, around 120.
I think it'll increase a little bit. I mean, his year-to-year number, like his rookie season to his second year, he did get more targets. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got like he prorated at 114, you said last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like 125 targets, like 10, 11 more targets.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not a bad number. And his yards per reception rate is good. I think the biggest plus of Calvin Ridley is his ability in the red zone to catch touchdowns.
And you know what, too? That's going to be even better this year with Hooper gone. Because Hayden Hurst is not going to get 10 touchdowns, I don't think. And Julio, like he's probably
for some reason doesn't.
Touchdown
it's funny because Julio gets more red zone targets than Calvin Ridley, but for some reason doesn't catch touchdowns. So that's
because they double team him in the red zone, and it just leaves Calvin Ridley wide open.
So I mean, I think Ridley might get 10, 11, 12 touchdowns next year and put up 100 receiving yards. I mean, 100 receiving yards, 1,100 receiving yards, or 1,200 receiving yards. I mean, that would be a really good season for him, and it would put him in the low end wide receiver 1 conversation. I don't think that there is an upside for him unless he hits. Like if Julio was to go down in week 3, and Calvin Ridley was to assume the main role and get 150, 160 targets, I think he actually could be a monster. But like assuming Julio is there, then I feel like you're looking at, I guess, I don't know, just that 125% target share total. So, looks like we just lost Rick on the phone call. Rick, we got you back.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
All right. So anyway, as I was saying, I think 1,200 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, that gets him into the wide receiver 1 conversation, but I think he's limited in terms of what the upside is for him. On the flip side of it, when you look at Allen Robinson, he has the 150 plus targets. He's done it 2 other times in his career, in 2015, 2016, his sophomore year and his third year in the league. 150 at 1 and 151 in 2 consecutive years. Last year, you would think, Allen Robinson had a highly efficient year, and that's why he played really well. No, he had 150 targets, and he only had 11 yards per reception, which is one of the lowest yards per reception total of his career, actually second lowest. He caught the most touchdowns he did in his entire NFL career, but it was only 7. So it wasn't like he was doing anything ridiculously efficient last year that would cause you to be like, okay, he's definitely going to regress in certain categories, right? I think that when you look at him with a, catch percentage with Mitch Trubisky being 63%, I think that's going to increase with Nick Foles coming in. I think the offense is going to be slightly more efficient than it was last year. And I think that Allen Robinson's going to get 150 to 160 targets. Now the question is, does Nick Foles being added to the team make them any better? Like, I think it offensively, does a little bit. Like last year they were, like I said, 31st ranked. How much higher do they get? Are they
like 25th?
That's what I was going to say. Are the 25th best offense in the NFL? Because if that's the case, I'm not. I love Allen Robinson at this pick, by the way. In this round. Love it.
For sure.
But the hard part that you have is that, when you're drafting, like you said, there's a chance Calvin Ridley could blow up this year, and his ceiling is high. Catches 12 touchdowns, gets 1,300 receiving yards. Maybe he cracks 130, 140 targets, right? And he gets into that conversation of being a top 6, top 7 wide receiver. I think Allen Robinson has 7, 8, I would say the ceiling for Allen Robinson, unless Chicago gets highly efficient, like say they end as a top 12 offense next year, somehow they end as a top 12 offense, then I think Allen Robinson has top 5 potential. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the hard part is Chicago sucks. Yeah. So on offense, and Calvin Ridley is in a really good offense. So if he ends up getting, the target share that he needs, I think he has the higher ceiling. So, I mean, if you want to take the safer bet you go with A-Rob. If you want to go with somebody,
who are you drafting?
I'm drafting Allen Robinson most likely. I think if you're going running back in the first 2 rounds, like we were discussing a second ago, or 3 running backs, you got to get somebody that you know is going to get the work at least first. You know, if you're drafting in the back end of the first round, 11, 12, 13, I was going to say 13, 11, 12, somewhere in that range.
14 team league.
You can get Juju in the 4th, 5th round. You can get Allen Robinson in the 3rd.
DJ Moore in the 3rd or 4th.
Right. So it's like you're talking about that range, but I would rather go with a safer wide receiver in the 3rd round if you're going to take 2 running backs early, because you're going to need at least something at the wide receiver position to start the season. You know, so it's like if you can get 9 targets a game out of Allen Robinson, I mean, bring it on. So that's the conversation that you got to have. But I think I definitely would go Allen Robinson here over Calvin Ridley. It's tough, but with Calvin Ridley especially going ahead of Allen Robinson, which I don't think should happen. I might actually have Allen Robinson ranked higher than Calvin Ridley in the draft guide, and I might need to adjust that, as of my opinions have changed on Allen Robinson as of late. But
yeah, they're right there though. Like even if you do switch them, I think they'd be neck and neck.
So let's talk about number 4 before we get to the final one and some quick news. Mia Cole Hardman, ADP 99, Deontay Johnson, ADP 101. Now this is an interesting one. Because these guys I've noticed are generally, they're kind of in the same tier or same conversation. Especially, I mean, I don't, like I said, I think they're in the same tier in my rankings, in the same conversation. It's really a question of which guy you want. Now, Pittsburgh is a tough conversation to have. They have Juju. He's established. He's going to get 160 targets. People love Deontay Johnson. But they also brought in Chase Claypool. He might play tight end. He might play wide receiver. We don't know. And every time we think we have the second wide receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers pegged, it ends up being somebody else. So I like Deontay Johnson. You might even be able to draft both of them onto your team, both Mia Cole Hardman and Deontay Johnson. But if you're assuming that the ADP is correct and these two are 4 picks apart or 3 picks apart from each other or 2 picks apart, then you have to choose one. You have to be like, okay, which guy are we going to get? I would say Hardman, on the pure fact that I don't think Watkins is going to be a Chief by the trade deadline, at least.
Okay.
Or at longest, I should say. I don't think he's going to be a Chief at the trade deadline. So he's going to get cut. He's going to get traded. Something's going to happen with Sammy Watkins where he's not on the team anymore. And Hardman's going to assume that second role. He might even assume that second role over Watkins before they get rid of him. So I think that Mia Cole Hardman has got that second role kind of in his grasp. And we talked about what he did with what was it, 40 targets last year?
Yeah, he only had 40.
I think he can hit 100. If he hits 100 targets, how efficient he is in that offense, it makes him a low end wide receiver 2/flex option that is great for your fantasy team. And to get that in the 10th, 11th round is just absurd. So I think he's a great selection. I would take Mia Cole Hardman here. It's nothing against Deontay Johnson. And I actually think that Deontay Johnson has a good chance of getting 100 to 120 targets. I just think the efficiency is going to be there for Mia Cole. And you'll get, or Mel Cole. I don't know. How do you say his name?
I say McCole.
Yeah. So, but Hardman's going to have all the work, or not all the work, but he might not get as much opportunity as Deontay Johnson, but he's going to be more efficient than Deontay Johnson. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I mean, personally, I'm kind of with you, McCole Hardman. I agree with you that I think Deontay Johnson will probably get more targets. He might even get more catches, but McCole Hardman will have more yards.
Got some kind of cavity up in here.
And what'd you say?
Got some kind of cavity up in here. I just drank and my tooth went numb.
Jeez, you don't want to mess around with that. But no, I mean, what it comes down to for me is the Chiefs are a better offense. Mahomes is a better quarterback.
Yeah, agreed.
I think McCole Hardman is going to be like you said, I think he will, even if Watkins stays on that team, I think Hardman's going to overtake him of Sammy Watkins for that second receiver spot. And meanwhile, Deontay Johnson is, he had 90 targets last year, which is really, really good. And he could get more targets, but he could also get like less with Chase Claypool there, with Eric Ebron there now.
No, right.
James Washington had a decent season last year too that people forget. And now Juju is 100% healthy, and I think Juju missed I want to say like 5 games last year.
Yeah.
So with all that factoring in with Deontay Johnson, he definitely has upside still. Both these guys have a lot of upside, but I'll take Mecole Hardman.
Let's get to our last conversation here. Russell Wilson, quarterbacks. Russell Wilson at ADP 51 or Dak Prescott ADP 55. These guys are like the same.
What'd you say?
I said these guys are like the same.
Yeah, I know they're very similar, but
pick an early quarterback.
I think you're going to be in agreement on this one with me too.
Yeah.
It's Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
The reason being is the amount of times they throw the ball. And with Mike McCarthy there as well. I mean, last year Dak had almost 600 pass attempts last year at 596.
Yeah.
With Mike McCarthy there, I wouldn't be surprised if they go to 600. You add CeeDee Lamb to that offense. That offense is ridiculous. Their offensive line isn't quite the same as it was like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's still a top 10 offensive line. And they still have there's just so much going on. And I do think Russell Wilson is solid. He's very efficient, but he's not going to throw the ball as much as Dak. And for that reason alone, I'll take Dak all day.
The only concern, I'll take Dak, but the only concern I have is that Russ seems to run it a little bit more than Dak Prescott does, and that might lead to more production for him at the quarterback position. Dak had 52 carries last year. He has this ability to rush that is very good. Like in good seasons, he can be around 4. What was I going to say? 5 yards per carry or somewhere in that ballpark, which is very good for a quarterback. So, but he just doesn't rush it. He doesn't rush it enough. He had the number 11. He was the number 11 quarterback in carries last year, and it just wasn't as much as you would like to see. It's
still a decent amount.
It's still a decent amount, and it gives him a good floor. But Russ does
as much as Russ
run more. Now, the big conversation with Russell Wilson that I've always had, and I have him ranked a lot lower than most people do, and it's just because of the efficiency. Now, I have a question for you. Would you take DK Metcalf or CeeDee Lamb?
Oh, Metcalf.
Okay, think about this year and beyond.
Oh, like just Dynasty or just in general?
In Dynasty in general, whatever you want to talk about.
It's probably CeeDee Lamb, but it's close.
Okay. So, but you say Metcalf is definitely the better option this year.
For this year, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, Dak's offense is going to be ridiculous, obviously. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Ezekiel Elliott. And then also, if you want to throw in Blake Jarwin, you can if you want.
He had a solid season last year.
He was okay, yeah. They literally picked up Jason Witten to replace him. But that's
it wasn't really replace. It was more just.
But anyway,
a placeholder.
So Dak, I think Dak is the obvious choice here because he has the more efficient options. Both of these guys had really good years, and I was going to fade both of them in 2020, but Dak just kept on getting good offensive pieces.
I know. It's like I wanted to fade him too, and then they drafted CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. I think the concerns that I have with Russ are that Wilson's not going to get
pass attempts, man.
Yeah, he's not going to get the pass attempts. Last year, he had 516 pass attempts, 75 carries, 342 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns, right? So he rushed it a little more than Dak, and that kind of matched the numbers. But there's only so much, he's always efficient, and that's how he plays the game. But I think there is a certain level to Rush's efficiency. And when you're talking about drafting a guy possibly as a top 5, top 6 quarterback, and he ends up as the quarterback 11 or 12, because he's still going to be a QB1. If he ends up 10, 11, or 12, then you're missing out on some really good wide receivers. I mean, some really good quarterbacks in that range. And so I think Dak is going to finish as a top 5 quarterback, probably top 6 if at worst. And I think Russell Wilson probably, there's a good chance that he gets 4,000 passing yards this year with 27 touchdowns, you know what I mean, which is still fantastic for a quarterback, by the way.
At very efficient numbers, like a 65, 66 completion percentage.
Yeah, something like that.
But just fantasy wise, there's definitely a chance that he just
Right. So, I mean, but they still have Lockett. They still got Metcalf.
Sure. No,
they got some good pieces offensively. He's going to be efficient. I just don't think he's going to be efficient as everyone thinks he is. I don't even want to call him a bust because he's not going to bust. He's just not going to perform at the level that people think. So if you can get Dak in that 6th or 7th round that they're getting drafted in, I would take Dak over Russell Wilson at this point. So I guess we're both in agreement there. Let's talk about a little bit of news before we conclude the show. Raheem Mostert requested a trade.
He did. During last podcast.
We both haven't. We're not going to adjust anything in our projections and rankings.
Not until something actually happens.
Until something actually happens. Because the only reason why Mostert requested this trade is because he doesn't want to be paid he's going to start this year, and he doesn't want to be paid as the worst running back on the roster. Yep. And so, because he came
doesn't all he want is just a $2 million pay raise. It's not even.
Yeah. So, I mean,
to go from $2 to $4 million.
I think the 49ers would probably give him that. I mean, they don't even.
Yeah.
Like, if they did trade him, I think Freeman comes in and starts for that team right away with Tevin Coleman, ridiculously. But. Yeah, I definitely think Mostert will probably start the season as a 49er. He'll end up playing. He has really in my opinion, like I think the 49ers should just give it to him and get over themselves a little bit. But I don't think Raheem Mostert has any negotiating power.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think he does a lot either. And if he does get traded, it's almost a guarantee that's going to be a bad situation for fantasy.
Yeah, he'll probably drop down to like 40 or 50 in my rankings if that's the case.
Yep. Same here.
It doesn't even matter where he goes. There have been rumors of New England.
There's always rumors for New England for every player.
I know that. I just mean like running backs they always do running backs. Like we need more of those. ESPN reports that the NFL and the NFLPA have yet to formally agree on the July 28th report date for training camp. The NFLPA, they can pretend that they can actually negotiate this, but you're going to show up for training camp on July 28th.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Well, what are they going to do? Just boycott? Isn't it? The NFL, I feel like, is a different beast. Like basketball, they're all soft. They're all like, oh my God, I can't play because I might get sick. And I'm like, I hate to sound like insensitive.
You sound like yeah, you do.
But like,
it's not like it's the coronavirus.
No, right. It's a serious thing. But like, you know what I mean? Like the NBA and the MLB, they're gonna be soft.
Attitude is like so
the NFL players were in the middle of COVID-19 lockdowns, like working out together and playing football and not even like high-fiving and hugging while they were sweating, and they just didn't give a crap. So I feel like a majority of players in the NFL are gonna be like, yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? But I think what they're trying to agree on is if there's portions of the season that are missed due to the virus and that they have to shut down like they can only play 8 games, how much the NFL can take in salaries and all that stuff. That's what they're kind of talking about at this point, and they want that figured out before the July 28th report date. And there's also rumors floating around that the NFLPA has offered no preseason games. The NFL wants to do 2, so. What we do know is that players have to show up and report and play by I don't even know what negotiating power the NFLPA has at this point, to be honest with you, because like they have to report like it's work. Like there's no special like thing in the CBA that says that, if there's a coronavirus, pandemic, you don't come to work. Like there's nothing in the CBA that says that. At least I don't think there is. Somebody can correct me on that if we have any lawyers listening to this podcast. But anyway, they're going to report on the 28th. I wouldn't be worried about it. Phil Yates reports that the Patriots have reached settlements in their Antonio Brown and Aaron Hernandez grievances. This saves them about $7 million in cap space, which is great news for them. They also reconstructed Rex Burkhead's contract to save them almost $1 million in cap space. So they have about $8 million or so to spend now.
I've heard a lot of people put David Njoku's name out there, which would be great. I'd love that.
Jordan Reed's also a free agent as well. Not that you want it. Jordan Reed, injury-prone tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of washed up.
That's fine.
The Patriots fans have said Jadeveon Clowney too, or they just want the game.
He's a free agent still? I forgot about him.
He is. Nobody wants to sign
Interesting.
him.
I think it's just cap space to have as the season goes along.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep. That's where I think it's going.
And then the final piece of news, the Washington Redskins confirmed that they will be changing their nickname after 87 seasons. They didn't reveal a replacement. Now, I have no ideas for this. I do not care what the Washington Redskins call themselves.
I don't either.
But what would you think is a good nickname for them? A good team name. I don't know why they keep calling it a nickname.
For me, like I would like them to keep an Indian heritage. Maybe like find like a tribe
that is relevant to the area.
Yeah, that's it's not saying Redskin. It's a little more like respectful, but still is able to keep up like the Indian heritage for the football team. I wouldn't mind that. I don't know if they're gonna do that though, because it's Dan Schneider. Yeah. It's probably going to be something really dumb.
Really stupid. The Senators or they can't have the Patriots. It's taken. That'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Please don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Buy that draft guide. Leave a comment and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, like we said at the beginning of the episode. And we'll be sure to talk to you on Thursday, Fantasy Champs, with a mock draft edition of the pod.
Oh, hell yeah. See you later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter at @TheFFChamps.